Monte Kiffin passes away, and I remember the discussion being when he was hired, how long do you have Monte Kiffin, his father, who was the defensive coordinator? Now, for those that don't know or are too young, I want to remind you that Monte Kiffin, at the time when he was hired, everybody wondered how much time he had left because he was 59 years old when he got hired.
69.
So 69, excuse me. So there was some intrepidation with the hire, but if you hadn't have packaged Monte Kiffin with Lane, I don't think it would have been nearly as well accepted, Caleb. I believe that it would have just been thought of as an okay hire. When you threw in Monty, when you threw in Ed Orgeron, that's what changed the feel of that hire and how everything was going to be different, and it wasn't the good old boy network anymore.
Yeah, that was the big part of the Lane Kiffin hire, and I always thought that was a negative of it. This is why I was never a fan of the hire, because I don't think you should ever hire somebody because of the staff they can bring in, because that staff's going to leave if they're good. I've always felt the head coach is in control of the program. At the time, I don't anymore, but I actually questioned Lane Kiffin's offensive acumen at the time because his only resume was being offensive coordinator at USC, which, Dave, you and I could have been offensive coordinator of that talent during that time, remember?
Yes.
And so I wasn't as big on the hire as many others. I did think highly of Ed Orgeron's reputation as a defensive line coach and a recruiter. That's as far as I thought of Ed Orgeron. I didn't think of him able to do anything else whatsoever.
I'll be real honest with you. I didn't know. I came away from that press conference when Lane Kiffin was introduced, and I didn't know if he would have success or not. I thought it would be really hard for him to fail with Monte Kiffin and Ed Orgeron, who, by the way, passed away. What was the official reason given for Monte's passing?
Monte Kiffin, I thought it might have been just natural causes.
Yeah, I imagine so. I believe he was.
Don't quote me on that, but
okay. I believe, yeah, he was in his mid 80s.
Mid-80s.
Yeah, so a lifelong coach. I am glad that he has been able to see his son have success at Ole Miss, because one of the strongest memories I have from the Lane Kiffin era is Monte Kiffin, an NFL guy, being so incredibly stunned that Tennessee's fans were mad that night that Lane Kiffin decided to leave. He said, why are they so upset? And get another coach. And he was just really taken aback. And I can't imagine, you'll be like this one day, you don't want to think about everybody in a city hating your son. Okay. So it was a weird position for him to be in. I'm glad he saw Lane have some success at another school to know that he didn't chuck his whole career.
Yeah, it's funny because and Derek brings it up on the message board, and Dave, you can speak to this more than I can, but I had always heard reports that Monty was not in favor of Lane leaving for USC, that he thought it was best for Lane to stay at Tennessee, and he wanted to stay at Tennessee too.
You know, I can't tell you that with 100% confidence, but what I was hoping to do just then was kind of hint at that. I got the feeling that, yes, he didn't want to go. He didn't want to go either. He thought they had a good thing going. And I think his son made a quick, impetuous decision. I don't, a lot of these decisions you take at least 24 hours to think about. I'm not sure that he did with this one.
Yeah. And for those who don't remember, Lane was 33 at the time. It's crazy for me to think about just that I'm just 3 years older than that. But I look back and I'm like, yeah, at 33, you can sometimes make rash decisions when you're up and coming. I wonder, Dave, if Tennessee had stuck with Lane Kiffin, if he had worked out, if he had not bolted for USC, how much longer would he have kept Monte Kiffin on staff? And if he couldn't have kept Monte Kiffin on staff, do you think the fan base would have started to question Lane himself? Because as you know, Monte Kiffin did get fired at USC, and that was just a precursor to Lane getting fired.
Well, I don't think they had a problem. I don't think they would have had a problem separating ways. I don't think Monty wanted to coach all that much longer. I think he was hanging on because of his son. So if his son had said, they're coming at me, if I get rid of you, you can retire and play with your grandkids more and you don't have to worry about coaching, and it extends my opportunity, I think they would have been okay with that. I really do. I think they would have said, well, let's do the best thing for both parties, because I've been coaching for 50 years and I don't really much feel like it. anymore. Look at my fantastic shirt. It is monogrammed. It looks awesome, and it's brought to you by Apex Apparel Group Design. Call to action is this: 15% off your order. You've got to do it. Your first order, do it now. 865-919-3001. 865-919-3001. Call Tyler. Say Off the Hook Sports sent you. And for all your promotional needs, especially the spirit wear, all kinds of items that you can choose from, and you know they're all taken care of, just call Tyler at 865-919-3001. And I would say this too: we have to give Lane Kiffin credit for fielding a respectable defense without having his father as the defensive coordinator, correct? I mean, he's gotten by, right?
He has. And Lane Kiffin, we've always talked about this, Dave. There's two types of coaches. There's the coach that's kind of the CEO, and then the coach where they're gurus on one side of the ball, and then they just trust their staff on the other side. Lane Kiffin was absolutely that, right? He was just the offensive guru, and he let Monte Kiffin run the defense. Now, based on what you're telling me, which I believe too, because Monte Kiffin was 69, that's really even a bigger indictment of the decision to hire Lane Kiffin, honestly, because a lot of it was about him being able to bring Monte Kiffin and Ed Orgeron. And we knew Ed Orgeron was somewhat of a mercenary, and outside of the state of Louisiana, where he was most loyal to, he was going to go wherever the best place for him was. And we knew Monte Kiffin's time was limited.
Okay, but you know Monte's time's limited. But when I say limited, I think everybody expected he'd coach 5 more years at least. And then you should be able to have your program on a solid footing where you should be able to go out and hire a coach. I agree with you. You should not hire a coach because of the staff he can bring in. However, getting Monte Kiffin as a part of the staff, I can see pushing me over the edge between that guy and somebody else that is kind of exciting. Does that make sense? I mean, if you're 50-50 and you're bringing Monte and Orgeron, you don't like it at all, do you? I can tell you. That's fine.
I did not like Tennessee's whole coaching search during that time because their top choice for a minute was Butch Davis, if you remember, after Fulmer was fired, which I thought was a terrible idea. I'm not to brag about myself because I'm the most humble person who has ever been on YouTube, guys. I'm a very humble person.
Yeah, there's no question about that.
I wanted Brian Kelly, funny enough. I was very high on Brian Kelly after his success at Cincinnati.
That was total bullshit.
You don't believe me? You don't believe me? No, I was dead set on Brian Kelly. And the year after he went undefeated at Cincinnati, and by the way, you can question his lack of national titles at Notre Dame, but anybody that knows that job knows it's borderline impossible to win a national title at Notre Dame.
I mean, I know all that, but and I'm not doubting that you thought he should have been hired at the time, but I don't think you look back at that and say that would have been a fantastic hire, or would I thought that Tennessee's fan base wanted to take the chance of a way different approach. And Brian Kelly, let's be honest, is similar to a Philip Fulmer approach. Older guy, does things by the book. Lane Kiffin's coming out there and he's throwing the ball around the park and he's exciting. Not the same offense he runs now, but he's a young guy. I got the feeling that Tennessee's fan base wanted a complete change. If you would have just hired Brian Kelly, who was in the Philip Fulmer mold, would you agree with that?
Somewhat. I don't think Philip Fulmer was ever going to do videos of himself dancing with recruits or putting on a fake accent to appease an area the way Brian Kelly does.
But I could argue Brian Kelly was going to figure out a way to stop a draw in the 2001 SEC championship game. So I'm not saying, but both.
That's my point. Brian Kelly's a better coach than Philip Fulmer.
I agree. But there's somewhere along the same mold. If you went to the fan base, I'll ask you on the message board. If they went to use the fan base and said, we're getting rid of Philip Fulmer for another old guy named Brian Kelly, nobody would have been okay with that. When Lane came riding in on this big orange Tennessee walking horse, everybody thought it was the greatest hire ever. Maybe not you, Caleb, but the community loved it. As a matter of fact, I would argue that it rubbed some salve over the firing of Philip Fulmer, because people were still upset about that. That's why they made the move so fast. That in Washington wanted the Lane bad.
Well, it's okay. So this was part of this was a unique time in college football because Nick Saban was just about to build the Alabama dynasty, and Florida was at the top. And I think, Dave, Florida was much more the flashy trash talker program. I mean, criminals too. But Florida, they really rubbed it in your face that they were successful, right? Under Urban Meyer. They went out of their way to rub it in your face. I think Tennessee was tired of losing and Florida rubbing it in their face that they're beating them. So they wanted Lane Kiffin to say, hey, if we're going to lose, at least we can talk a lot of trash and, rub them the wrong way. What was hidden underneath all of that, though, was Florida's the way they carried themselves as a program. They were about to collapse. And Alabama, who stayed under wraps and just went about their business the way they carried themselves as a program, they were about to take off. I think Tennessee wanted the Florida model more than the Alabama model. Now, I say that Lane Kiffin wanted the Alabama model. I will never forget the press conference ahead of the Tennessee-Alabama game in 2009. You probably remember it, where Lane goes, Florida's a great program, but Alabama's really who we want to model ourselves after. And I think Lane knew, and we all found out in that SEC title game that year, that Alabama was about to take over the SEC and Urban Meyer and Florida were about to implode. There was clearly some knowledge of that.
Yeah. Crystal says it felt like Lane Kiffin was the cure-all at the time. It did. Somebody said on the message board if Caleb was as smart as he thought he was, that he'd be on ESPN. No, he is smart, and that's why he's not. 'Cause that's not the job you want. Today's tough question has to do with the Kiffins.
Could you imagine, though? Remember the press conference? I just had to point this up real quick. Remember that Monte Kiffin, Ed Orgeron press conference where they were both introduced, and Ed Orgeron said that the most important thing is for the athletes to go to school and graduate. I'm like, okay, yeah, you really, really care about that, Ed Orgeron. If there's a coach in the world that doesn't care about that, it's Ed Orgeron.
I really don't remember. I don't remember that press conference at all. Maybe I may have been on a recruiting trip or something. Did they hold it together? Is that what they did?
Yeah, Lane Kiffin introduced them together.
It was the worst kept secret. Oh, but today's tough question is right now. It's brought to you by Rick Terry Jewelry Design. If Lane Kiffin would have stayed at UT, the Vols would have not won a title, won one championship, won multiple titles. Your thoughts? Today's tough question.
Today's tough question. Take a side. Take a stand. The Dave Hooker Show, a presentation of offthehooksports.com.
I can't say that Lane Kiffin would have won a title. So I'm going to go with not won a title, which is 38%. 48% said won one championship. 14% said we'll win multiple championships. Now, we had Jimmy Himes on, and we asked him a similar question, and he said, I'm not going to guarantee a championship, but I guarantee you he would be under NCAA investigation. So that's one of the factors. The other factor is the one you just brought up, and that's Alabama's coming up, and Alabama's going to be there. So if you're talking about a non-Alabama SEC, then yes, I think that in a decade, I think it's very, very reasonable to think that Lane Kiffin could have won 3 SEC championships, come close, or won a national title as well. But not with Nick Saban in the conference.
No, not at all. I do think that Lane Kiffin... I actually think Lane Kiffin would have won. Ready for this? He'd won the SEC in 2011. That year specifically. That's the year that Les Miles squeaked by Alabama in the regular season, that 9-6 game, number 2 versus number 1. And LSU would have played Tennessee, and Lane Kiffin would have had his recruits in, and then it becomes a match of wits. Lane Kiffin's brains versus Les Miles' brains. Now, whose brains are you taking in that situation?